All right, there we are. I think we're live, guys. Everybody, it's Gavin Seim here. Welcome, Tribe, to the channel and another one of our live shows. This one is a little impromptu today. I thought we'd do some fun stuff this week for the spring sale over at seimfx.com because everything, all the tools, all the workshops, everything is on sale. You can head over there and check it out if you want to support the channel and get some awesome new stuff. But today I thought we'd do a class talking about be more decisive in editing. I was thinking about black and white and Lightroom because it's one of the my more recent products that I'm really excited about. But as a newer product, it's not been adopted as much as some of the other ones. And I was thinking, oh, I should do a video about that. And then I started thinking, you know, there's something I've been thinking about a lot, and that is talking more about being decisive, not just in black and white, but with color. So I thought I'd expand that a little bit. We are going to look at black and white and some techniques for great black and white, like I do a lot of videos about on the channel here, but I thought that we would do a little more. And so I hope that you guys are hearing okay. I've got the chat up. Shout out to me in the chat if you're getting good audio. You should actually be able to watch this all the way up to 4K. We've got a pretty good stream going through here, and it should be rock solid. So you guys shout out to me as we get started. And hang on a second. As we get started, and let me know. And today we're going to look at a lot of cool stuff. So regardless of, I hope some of our people from our list and the tribe and the group here make it in live, and you guys will throw in your questions. And then this one, I'm probably going to leave this one up after we're done as well, unlike the specific webinars like we'll be doing on Thursday. Make sure you don't miss that. In fact, I will put that in the chat room. The Lightroom webinar I'm doing again, and of course everyone is different because my webinars are actually live, so they're not just like a replay marketing thing. We actually do these webinars live and deal with problems. And great, Renee, good to see you in there. Bernadette, glad you guys can hear me. But yeah, make sure you check out the Lightroom webinar after this as well, and get it on that Thursday afternoon, because we're going to be looking specifically at Lightroom and creating your Lightroom formula and mastering your Lightroom skills. And that, I think, is going to be a good thing. I'm going to be watching the chat for your guys' questions, so hold nothing back on me. If there's something that you're struggling with in your editing, with light, with tone, with the way that you manage images in the software, or if you have questions about any of the products that I make, I oftentimes feel like I have a lack of videos explaining the difference between all the different products. Not just of mine, but I think people struggle a lot with when to use what software is best for what's the true difference between Lightroom and Capture One and Photoshop and all these kind of things. And then, you know, when should I use an action? When should I use a preset? When should I manually edit? Because there's a time to go to those manual sliders. Using tools and presets is often made fun of by people on the internet of, oh, that's for the amateurs, when in reality, the opposite is true. The more experienced photographers know that good tools save them immense amounts of time and get them better results. And I've promoted that a lot, but I hope to do some more videos on that. Make sure you check out the video I did this week on the power of using actions in Photoshop. I think I just uploaded that on the channel yesterday. If you guys missed it, great. Yeah, that's a shame, but let me know, Renee, if you have any questions, or you can send him a message, see if he has any questions. I am good here to go. I've got my cactus leaf to nibble on, and I've got my water, and we've got a good internet connection. And I kind of want to eat this, but no, that would be kind of rude. So I'll wait till we have a break, because I'm looking at my Nepali here and being like, eso para hacer muy bien, quiero comer. All right, you guys. So let's do this. I want to start, first of all, and probably what I'm going to do, like I do a lot of live streams, is I'm going to trim the live stream. When it actually goes live, I'll cut off the kind of the tails and the ends and stuff like that, so we have a concise video to then go on the channel. But you guys get to see all of it, the ups and downs. Make sure you shout out in the stream if you're seeing any problem with streaming. I've done speed tests, internet checks, and we're pretty stable here, but just let me know if you see any problems. And I'm going to go ahead and we'll get going. I'll watch the chat. Please do send their questions. Sometimes people are timid, especially in the arts. I think people are timid to say, oh, I need this or I need that, or or all this stuff. And one thing I learned from my late mentor Ken Whitmire, he had more awards than I could count. And he was one of the greatest portrait photographers of the 20th century. But Kim would always ask questions. And I remember, he was 85? And I would be at his events and at workshops, and he would come to mine, and he would be sitting there raising his hand and asking questions about things that I knew, like technology stuff, Lightroom, digital, or anything, right? He was always asking questions. And he really taught me an important lesson. Artists tend to be very egotistical. I know that's human nature, but I think as artists, we're prone to be a little bit defensive, right? Because we have our style, we have our feeling, and some people like it and some people don't, and so sometimes that hurts. And I think sometimes because of that, we limit ourselves we limit making ourselves vulnerable, right? We've all seen the groups, the toxicity in Facebook photo groups and things like that, where everything is negative. Oh, why did you do that? Oh, that looks ugly. Why would you do that? Stuff that you would never say to a fellow artist if you were face to face. And so I think the internet and social media has really bred a level of toxicity in the art realm that's made it but made people feel like there's a lot of posing required. Does anybody else notice that? Well, we have to pretend that we have it all figured out. And I'm here to say that I don't. One of the reasons I love teaching what I know, I've been using Lightroom, for example, since before the Lightroom came out on the original beta. And one of the things I do is I like to share what I know, just like I used to do on the Pro Photo Show. But what I learned is that in doing that, it makes me more open to ask questions, to seek ideas. And that's what actually happened to make things like all the tools I make on Seim FX, the presets. I'll be honest, it's frustrating for me these days because I go to Facebook and all I see is ads for presets. And the first preset collection for Lightroom that I remember being commercially available in the entire industry was my Power Workflow presets back in, 2010 or something like that, when Lightroom first came out. And it hurts my ego a little bit because what's happened with Lightroom presets is everybody's like, oh, there's Lightroom users. The internet marketers entered the scene and just started throwing together well-presented packs of Lightroom presets. They don't have to work because there's no guarantee. There's no refund when you don't like them. And so, it's the Sunset collection, the Golden Hour collection. And I'm not saying that my peers are making bad tools, but what's happened, there's some great stuff out there, but what's happened is photographers, especially newer photographers, are overwhelmed because there's so much internet marketing stuff and Facebook ads and all this stuff being thrown at them, and there's so little talk about the foundations. So while yes, I have to make a living and I need to sell products and workshops and things like that, photos, I need to keep things moving. I need to be creating all the time. I love it when we can do workshops like this where we just are talking about real technique. And that's not talked about very much more. Light is not talked about. Tone is not talked about. All that's talked about is the new AI filter. And I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about those, but I want to talk about technique. Okay, but let me stop talking and start showing, and I'll watch your guys' questions. I'm going to jump in and start talking about being decisive in editing, and you guys throw your questions in there. I know, Renee, it's sad sometimes, and I don't want us to be that way. I don't want to sit here and be negative about other artists, but I want us to really put an emphasis on craft. Having great tools is really important, but if we master our craft, that's what really sets us apart. Let me switch my screens over here, and I think you're going to be able to see everything and even see me down in the corner there, which is good. More or less. And there we go. I have a photo here, and actually a lot of these are photos I've been doing testing. I'm always out shooting. That's number one. That's why I started doing a lot of street photography. And why I really love it is because it's a constant challenge. Anybody can go and take a photo of the street, but getting good street photos is really, really hard. And if you've tried it, you know. And I'm not really a very good street photographer. I'm getting better. I'm improving over the past year, I would say. And I really just try to go out there and say, no, I got to look for things that are interesting. But then I can come back and do the same with my experimental collaborative portrait sessions with models and things like that I do. I can come back and start experimenting. I was actually in here working on Filmist, on the new Natura. I was redoing the Natura preset, the Natura Gen 2. I recently just redid Portrait in the Filmist emulsion collection. And this last week I was working on Natura, and that's going to be pushed out probably this week. And working with these film profiles really gets me thinking, because you take an image like this straight out of camera and it looks fine. And then you start having to ask yourself, well, do I edit it, right? Do I do an effect? Do I go here and do I do a black and white? Do you know how often I see people take a photo? And I see this all the time on Instagram, right? Here's raw. Here is, okay, I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna do Natura. Yeah, it looks great. Let's try Natura push. No, I'm gonna go Natura. It looks good. Let's do a vignette. Let's do a little bit of mods on this, right? Or wait, maybe I should do this in black and white. Okay, so let's go down. I'm gonna go to Silver 4. I could go to black and white in Filmist. Now I could do this all over here, obviously, and manually do all this, but I'm always emphasizing that the first thing I always do is go to formulas, presets, actions, things like that. Because by browsing over, I'm getting 50 different varieties of an image in 10 seconds, right? That would take me hours to do that many varieties manually, and I wouldn't do it. So I could say, no, let's go something like this. No, that's not working. Maybe we should stick with color. I don't know what to do. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm just going to take this and I'm going to upload both, all right? I'm just gonna do both. Why not? I'm gonna upload a color and a black and white. Sorry, I'm distracted because it looked like maybe I lost the stream there for a second, but I think we're still in there. Okay, and if you've been, I know you've been scrolling through Instagram and you see like a cute photo of a wedding or a model or something like that, and there's a color, and then you swipe over and there's a black and white. And I see those and I always stop. Have you seen those? Because I know you have. Tell me what you think when you pop in there and you see the color and the black and white side by side. When you are looking at a wedding and one photo is black and white, the next photo's color, the next photo's black and white, right? We're in here and we're like, okay, I'm gonna do, should I do my groups, right? Should I do my groups in color or should I do them in black and white? Maybe I should mix them out. Maybe I should do one of each, right? And typically the answer is no, absolutely you shouldn't. And I think there's a lot of things we can talk about when it comes to decisive editing and decisive presentation. Being decisive about an image really starts before you even press the shutter. It's about having a visualization here. So if I go in and I say, let's take an image and let's do it both ways, what am I really saying to my client, right? Here's a street photo, and I can say, all right, let's look at some color mixes, or let's go to a black and white. Now, it might work both ways, but what I try to do, even on street, is already know beforehand. I use the previews in camera to be decisive. That is, I use the modes, the color modes. So I'm gonna say, no, if I'm shooting black and white, I'm changing the camera to black and white. And I have my street mode profile saved on this particular Fuji, right? And it's black and white. And so I'm seeing in black and white, I'm thinking in black and white. And then I say, no, I'm not really feeling that. I'm just gonna switch it to like a Velvia or a classic negative profile. But bear in mind, while shooting street, I do shoot JPEG and RAW, and then just throw the JPEGs away unless I need one to share on social media. I don't actually save both of everything except for reference photos for videos on the channel and things like that. But I'm shooting with the profile on. I'm previewing with the profile on. Because if I don't, I'm not really going to be very decisive. And that, I think, is one of the biggest problems that we face in really crafting our images, is that we don't start out being decisive. So if I start out here being decisive, and there's people that like the Leica monochrome, and I'm a little bit like, boy, I don't know. I mean, as cool as it is, I wouldn't want to throw away all my color channels in a digital file, right? I want my raw file so I can edit my black and white with those color channels, right? If you look at Lightroom actions, or if you look at Silver, or if you're manually editing in Lightroom or in Capture One, you have all those channels that you're able to work with. Okay, so let's actually see that for real. However, you have all those channels, but if you throw away that information, well, then you don't have anything later. But if you don't actually think about what you're shooting, as in I'm previewing in black and white, then you're kind of to this, oh, I can do color or black and white. Now, I'm not saying I won't change my mind. I will take an image. And let's take this here, for example, right? So here's this really cute image. And I think we're on the raw. Here's the raw file right here. Okay, so the tennis shoes don't quite fit. Let's crop those out. Let's leave the flowing dress. You know, this is really pretty. Let's go like this. All right, and so I've just cropped. We're in Lightroom. We could be doing the same thing in Capture One. Increase my exposure a little bit. And I can look at this and say, well, this looks great in black and white. Okay, so I'm gonna go this to black and white. But what I should do is I should already have a plan for this image beforehand. I should already know where I'm going with this before I even start. Now, so I can go through and I can say, let's do raw silver or pure luma or something like that and get a nice black and white process. Or I can go through and I can say, no, let's go filmist and let's do some color. Let's even try a portrait, or maybe the new Natura looks good. And let's go to our white balance right up here. Because remember, when you apply a preset, it shouldn't touch exposure and it shouldn't touch white balance. Those are variables that a preset or an action, etc., can't really determine unless it's specifically like a push process effect meant to push it. You should always be editing with your control over white balance and exposure. Because if I do auto, most of the time auto white balance fails. Even now in Lightroom with its more advanced AIs and all this stuff, auto white balance usually doesn't work for me. And I always, if I'm going to look at an image and say, well, this looks good, but it's a little green. The problem isn't actually with the preset or the profile. It's that I just need to adjust it slightly for white balance, maybe make it a little warmer to bring out the tone that I was feeling for it, right? Make it lighter, darker, tweak it just a little bit to get what I want. But what is the end game of that? Did I do it right by doing it in color, or did I do it right by doing it in black and white? And here's what I'm saying. If you're sharing an image, I don't want to drag on with this because I want us to get into actually looking at some editing tips. I want to get to you guys throwing questions in there. If we're shooting an image and we're uploading it in black and white and color, it's because we can't decide. If we can't decide whether an image is black and white and color, how on earth is the client supposed to decide? We're the creators, right? If we, the image maker, don't know how our image should be edited, how's the client going to decide? And how's the client going to have faith and confidence that we really know what we're doing? It's not that black and white or color is bad. Now, that brings us to the next question. When should you shoot black and white and when should you shoot color? If you guys are like me, thanks, Renee. Yeah, that was a really cute one. That was a cute session. She did a great job. If you guys are like me, you look at a photo and you're like, okay, I just like this photo. But if I was thinking beforehand, I was like, no, right, this light, this color, the color of this dress, this is a black and white. No, this is a color scene. I love the greens back there behind, right? So I could say, here's another shot right here. And I can be like, no, I could do this in black and white, but I already know I want this in color because of the red contrast, that red and black on the dress contrasting with the green behind. I know I'm going to get a great result by doing this in color. So I'm going to go to something like Agfa Flex Vista, tweak my exposure, and boom. Now at this point, I could take this to Photoshop, right? And just work it some more and make it even better to go to print, to go to the client, to be uploaded, etc. I can tweak with my crops. I should throw out there that I almost always, when I'm editing, going an image to Photoshop, I will remove the crop, edit the entire image in Photoshop, then bring that result back to Lightroom so I have the full crop. So if I change my mind on the crop later, I'm not stuck. I have the whole frame to work with. So if you're here and you say, this is good, but let's make it black and white. This is a hugely common misconception of black and white, because there's an idea that, oh, black and white is easy. I'll just desaturate. And black and white is so much more complicated. That's why I make packs that are dedicated to black and white, because in black and white, you have to be able to separate the color. You have to create atmosphere. Everything in a photo, I showed this in the recent Photoshop Fast workshop, where I taught Photoshop in 4 hours, and it's on my site. I'll link that in the show notes. And actually, the recent video I just uploaded about actions was an excerpt from Photoshop Fast. If I go to here on this image, and a lesson I illustrated in Photoshop Fast is that everything in our images is contrast, right? And I just did a video on my channel about this. If I pull my histogram to the middle, right? You can see that middle line right here in the histogram. So here's the highlights, here's my curve, and here's my histogram kind of shadowing in the background there, right? I pulled the highlights to middle. Now I'm going to lift the shadows to the middle. Boom, 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 and there we go. Look at my photo that I just made. Now, let's undo that. What just happened, though? Everything in that image just disappeared because there was no contrast. Everything you see in an image is contrast. And if you realize this, things are going to get easier. Because when you realize that everything is a separation of light and dark, you know how when you go to buy a television, they're always talking about contrast ratio. A lot of times the numbers are completely made up and they're BS. But true contrast ratio is the ratio from black to white, just like we talk about ratios when we're using lighting, right? If you've studied studio lighting, if you've watched my Expose workshop, you've seen me talk about ratios. There's a ratio on my face right here, right? This side of my face versus this side is probably about I want to say it's about a 4:1. That is 2 stops, right? So 1 stop is twice as much. 1 stop more is 4 times as much. So it's probably a 3:1 or a 4:1 right here from the big studio light I have on this side of my face to the more shadowy side that I have bouncing off of this side. So ratios, contrast ratios, all these fancy words we throw around ultimately are just words for contrast. The problem people have when they're editing is there's a little bit of a mindset. There's kind of a joke that we say when we're editing of, well, if there's a problem with your image, just convert it to black and white and call it art. And this is kind of a rule of thumb that photographers, particularly in the digital world, have lived by for a long time because it's so easy to convert to black and white. And then what looked blurry, we can call atmosphere now, sometimes. In truth, it's a pretty terrible mentality to have. But there is an element of truth in that sometimes you'll have an image and it's just not working in color because maybe technically it's not as good. And you can actually make it a black and white, and now it can be like a background. It can be a filler image. It can be an atmospheric image because black and white tends to be very atmospheric. But in practice, if you don't have a plan, you're going to fail, or at least you're going to have a weaker image. Let's look at an image like this. There's a lot of images that you could say, okay, this is a neat photo. I could do this in color, right? I could go to natural HDR, let's say, and let's put a natural HDR preset on this that kind of brings out the color. Let's use Miscape from natural HDR. Okay, that's a pretty good edit. Or we could say, all right, let's go in and let's do a black and white. Let's go to silver and do something like simple silver or Renaissance. All right, so that looks good. Neither one is wrong. The reason we don't upload 2 is because you have to decide as the creator which one is the better image. You have to decide what your vision is. That gets so much easier if you already have a vision before you press the shutter. Because if you do that, you start seeing the light for that. The light that's ideal for black and white and the light that's ideal for color isn't the same. So if I go here, and let me give you, let's see if we can find an example of this, right? Go to this image here. Okay, if we look at this photo, which I believe is another one that I processed just with a filmist look, but let's go in and just put something on it. Let's go to Belladonna, for example, and just click through and find a color process that looks good. This is nice. Let's do Bright Skin 2.0. Okay, and then I could say, okay, this is nice. Let's crop it in a little bit. Let's bring it a little from the left. Now let's leave it, I don't know. Do I crop like tight and square for Instagram, or do I leave some space? All these are things of decisiveness. And really this is the topic of today's video, not just when to edit black and white, but how to be decisive. Cropping an image can be the same way. Where do I cut off the horizon? Do I cut it off above the mountain? Do I leave the sky? Do I cut the sky? The more you question yourself and force yourself to make decisions on these things, the more you're going to start doing that in camera and getting better results. If I take this image, okay, and say, well, this looks nice. Let's edit this, and it looks good. I'm not going to crop it in all the way because I want to edit and then crop it, all right? So I'm just going to crop this left side off just a little bit. What happens if I go to silver instead and do a black and white? Okay, what's happening is I'm losing my subject a little bit. I can edit this in black and white, but this is not really an image that was shot for black and white. This is an image that the contrast is actually created by the surrounding greens. We have dominant greens in the scene, in this water, contrasted by her skin tone, right? Maybe even the swimsuit should have green in it, so we kind of have this color theme. But we have blue in the swimsuit, we have the white skin, and then we have everything else is kind of this green theme. And of course, we could tweak our white balance a little bit to get the skin right where we want it, but ultimately we have this yellowish green warmth. The problem is there's a lot of elements in this image. So if I just switch this to black and white, or if I just desaturate it even worse, you notice what's happening is she doesn't really pop, because our separation here, our contrast in this image, and this is what I want you to really stop and listen closely. The contrast of this image is in the color, not in the tone. If an image has contrast that's based on color versus tone, it might not be best for black and white. Think about that when you pull the trigger. Think about that when you release the shutter. If you're in a scene like this, the separation of her skin tone is actually very important because it's what makes her stand out. Obviously, we have a beautiful model in the middle of this kind of water feature, and this dam, this river flowing down. Okay, great. But when we take away the color, we actually lose contrast. So the obvious thing might be like, oh, let's just increase the contrast. But all that's doing is really separating blacks from whites. It's making a stronger differentiation of the light and the dark, essentially, in the contrast algorithm. This goes back to the contrast video I did on the channel, I think, last week. So go watch that if you didn't see it. Increasing whites or blacks, or these are just ways to increase contrast. And like I told you with the histogram lesson, everything in an image is contrast. If you have no contrast, you see nothing. The image disappears when the contrast disappears. But contrast can be created by color as well as by tone. Even though they're kind of one and the same, they're kind of like two sides of the same page, because both of them are creating contrast. These are actually very advanced techniques that I don't hear talked about very much. And yet they're not very complicated. If we were teaching photography based on tone, contrast, and color theory, and then combining that with the artistic merits of composition, people's images would really explode. You'd really hurdle past a lot of things. So if sometimes you're watching my videos and you're like, oh, Gavin's trying to be philosophical again, that's not actually what I'm trying to do. These are theories that over the past 20 years I've realized, wow, this is simpler than it looks. So let's go back to our color version of this, right? So I'm going to go back and do something like the bright skin again. And sure, it's a nice image. Let's go to this one now, though. In this image, we actually have more going on with color. You can see I've cropped in a lot on this. Is that good? Is that bad? Well, you can be the decider of that. Let me switch it. I forgot to switch the screen. Okay, so here's another portrait. And I'm asking myself, I'm being decisive now, right? I'm saying, well, I shot it as a vertical, but maybe I should make it square. Okay, let's make it square. Let's go to here. Let's go to the crop with the R tool in Lightroom. Go to 1:1 and crop it square. Okay, we don't need a ton of space on the bottom of this stone wall. We just want to see the lines and the angles of that stone wall because we kind of have these crisscrossy leading lines. There's kind of a Z here from those walls. But do I really want this sky? I might actually end up with a better image by not going perfectly square and actually cutting all the way this out so I just have foliage. Because notice what just happened. I'm not going to say either one is wrong. We could do highlight recovery and stuff on that top area. And maybe I'll edit it that way just to show you guys how we would recover that and make it look not distracting here. Because if I go into Lightroom and I just pull down highlights, right? So let's put another preset on just to get us a shortcut, right? Let's get there quick. Let's go to something like Filmist. All right, so I'm gonna go to Filmist and let's go to, I'm really loving the new Natura. Okay, let's put the Natura. It looks pretty good. We see we have nice greens, we have nice skin tones. Now, I'm going to show you something though. This image, even though my visualization was more like this, right? I was shooting for color really, not for black and white here. But I know for a fact that this image works in black and white. And you know why that is? Look at the histogram of this one. Where's our other one that we were just looking at? Hang on, let me put those two side by side so I can show you guys, okay? So if I take this image of Ivana with a swimsuit, and you can see if you look at our histogram, we have a fairly wide use of tonal range, but there's a very clean ramp, right? All the color channels are almost the same tone, and they're kind of leaning towards the midtones. Even though it's a nice image, there's contrast. There's not a huge separation in zones from her skin to the rocks, the foliage, the water droplets, etc. If I go to here, on the other hand, there's quite a bit of difference between our subject, which is strobe lit on the face. So we see some wraparound on the face here. We can see some rimming on the skin by the way the light's coming in. There's some catch lights. And then we have the background, which other than the sky, is darker. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do with this image is I'm going to show you, and this is where I'm going to come into what actually I was thinking when I first went to make this video, but I realized I could make this video so much more today. And I wish every one of the thousands and thousands of people that I sent this email to could have made it to this today, because I think you're going to see all this come together in just a moment here. Let me go here. All right. So we've made this image. You can see that I've edited this. FYI, let me close this and not save it. Let me go back to here. I applied that 1600, the new Natura 1600 Gen 2 to this. It's a nice color profile. I like it. And it looks good. However, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to take the grain off. There's also a preset to remove the grain in Filmist. But I want to take the grain off before I go into Photoshop and then add it again when I come in. So I'm going to turn my grain down to 0. Grain and texture on an image is a really great thing because it really helps to bring in the texture, that kind of organic feel. And I think that's really important in an image. But when I go to Photoshop, I'm going to take it off because I want to edit the image and not build up artifacts. In Photoshop, you're building up layers and you're building up layers. And sometimes if you do that and you have a lot of sharpening or a lot of grain, it's best to leave that for the final point in the edit. All right, so coming back in here and making sure that I'm still live and everything's doing good. Yes, okay. So if I go in here, I could edit this as color. And I could also edit as black and white. So let me show you why this one works as black and white. I'm going to run the Blackroom action, the Blackroom master tool. The reason I'll come into Blackroom, silver presets work great, but if I'm doing a more advanced edit, I'll bring it into Photoshop and do a Blackroom edit if it's a feature image. Because as you can see what this does, Blackroom is infinitely more advanced black and white edit than just that single layer raw edit that we get in Lightroom. So if I look here, what Blackroom is actually doing is it's building up all these different layers right, that we can then add things to. We can change the curves, the mix intensity, the base mix, but it's a tone mapped black and white. So this layer here, this tone map, is actually converting everything to black and white. So we can do all these edits down below, and then the final layer is converting everything to black and white, which gives us an immense amount of control. But the cool thing that we did in Lightroom, and why I was so excited, and why I keep telling people, look, if you want black and white, don't stop at Silver 4. Go to Lightroom on your best images. Because now I can go in here, and I can say, well, let's use a foundry mix. What the foundries are is they're a mix of all kinds of different actions down here. So down here, all these actions, let's say I want to do a yellow 12 filter. I can just click this, and it adds it into the main group. I don't have to do anything other than click it. Now I can do more. I can do anything if I want to. I can double click that layer. It's fully editable, and I can tweak it around and get different looks of how I manage my filter, right? I can say, let's do the sweet skin tones filter. And again, it's going to put a curve in there that's specifically for those skin tones. It's putting it within the right group in the Lightroom main folder that was created when I first ran the Lightroom master tool. But look at what's happening here, because something else that Lightroom has is the zone map that's included in Lumist. In Lumist, you can actually select and edit every zone, so it's a great extension for the more advanced edits in Photoshop. But what I did is I built that zone map into Lightroom so that it can be used side by side with Lumist, or if you don't have Lumist, you can just use it as the zone map. You'll notice if you look at the zones, and this is a color representation of the zones from zone 0, black, to zone 10, red, okay? So you can see the only place we're clipping at all is kind of up here. We're into zone 10 in this sky. And down here, we have a little bit in the zone 1. We have a wide use of the tonal range, which is good, but maybe we need to tone it down a little bit. But what you'll notice is that her skin tones are pushed up. So a lot of this background area is down in zone 2, 3, 4, and 5, whereas her skin is 6, 7, and 8 for the most part, right? Her skin has got a couple stop separation. And it's not good enough just to have tonal contrast, right? Because you remember what I said, there's light contrast, there's tonal contrast, and there's color contrast. Both are a form of contrast, but when you convert to black and white, yes, you can create contrast from color using the channels, providing you kept your color information, which is why I don't like a monochrome file. I like a file with the color information. But a black and white is all about tone. Ultimately, you're converting everything to tone, whereas a color image, we're separating using the contrast of color as well as tone. So in some ways, color is easier. In some ways, it's more complicated. But you can see that we have a rather complex tonal map here, but our subject stands out pretty good here. So if I actually go back, I'm going to reset this, because this is one of the beauties of Lightroom, is I can just reset it. So this just resets it to my base black and white, and I can say, no, let's try something new. Let's do something like the Art Portrait Foundry, which is actually going to automatically run a whole bunch of actions, add the layers in the correct place, all the sharpening, all the atmospherics, all the grains into the Lightroom group, and then immediately, just like that, be done. But unlike a plugin or something which gives you a flat layer, you now have all these controls. So you can turn layers on and off, you can control them. I can control the overall intensity of this in Lightroom simply by changing the compression of the map. Because remember, everything below the final layer is color, and then the final layer converts everything we've done to black and white. So I can say limit the map so it's a more compressed tone and it's a more lifted shadow. I can say make it a higher key map for more contrast, make it a lower key map to make it darker, or make it a traditional map that includes all the zone. So what I'm doing is I'm actually taking, with these blue buttons here, I'm telling the actual main conversion of the black and white image to interpret in different ways in terms of how much compression of tone, how much of the tonal range it allows to be used to give her a different look without actually having to rebuild the whole effect. And I get excited talking about this because what's going on with Lightroom is such advanced level black and white editing but it literally is just click, click, click. You don't actually have to know what's going on and what I'm explaining. You just have to apply these different mixes and try things and turn layers on and off until you get the look that you want. And so not only do you learn Photoshop better by doing this, but you edit vastly faster and you get much more complicated edits than you would get otherwise, even as an advanced Photoshop editor, because I wouldn't build all this manually. But let's go back to the color. I'm going to go here. Remember, everything that Lightroom does is within its own group. So I'm going to delete our black and white edit, and I'm going to go back to the color edit that came out of Lightroom. And make sure you shout out if you have any questions about where I'm going with this. And I want to know that I'm presenting to you guys kind of what I'm feeling and these concepts of contrast and how they relate to being decisive with an image. Because that's ultimately our topic, is decisiveness. When I cropped this image, I said, no, I should crop this down and cut out the sky, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that decision. But if I crop it, I kind of need to stick with that decision. Especially if I crop it and then go to Photoshop, I'm kind of stuck with that decision. What I did with this is I left in the sky. So I could go down and I could edit with Lumist. I could edit with Alchemist, maybe, and do, you know, some cool looks, right? I could go down to Alchemist and say, no, let's do the freak retouch and let's focus on the original color visualization for this. And go in here and just kind of enhance this a little bit with the freak retouch from Alchemist, okay? So it enhances the skin, it enhances the contrast dynamic range. You can again see that we have this kind of warm color in the skin and then the cool color in the background and the greens, and there's a fairly nice balance there. But we're clipping here. I'm gonna do something, and this is something I just showed at length in the Photoshop Fast course, but I'm gonna show it quickly here, and that's just to go down here and create a new layer. And I'm going to name this layer, I'm going to double click it and call it Pixel Paint. Okay? Pixel painting is something I talk about a lot. It's something that should be talked about way more, because if I go to this image here, okay, so if I make a flat version of this image on top with the freak retouch, Shift Control Alt E to merge these layers with the stamp visible command. And so I just took everything I had done and put it here. So now I could delete this group of edits to save space, right? I could delete all that. I have my original that came from Lightroom, and I have my edit that I did with Alchemist, right? Now I have this blank layer on top. If I went to my edit layer and just went to a burn tool, very powerful, the burn and dodge tool. But if I just take a burn and dodge tool and try and restore this here, what's going to happen? I can darken, right? That's cool. I'm darkening. That's good. Let's make it a little softer. So I could darken up here, for example, right? I want the focus. It's a little too intense. Let's turn our exposure down right up here. I could darken everything down around her. What am I doing? I'm creating more contrast. Instead of using a contrast slider, I'm selectively darkening the things that are not my subject while not adding contrast to her. And I had a whole chapter on this in my recent workshop, so I'm just kind of giving you the quick Cliff Notes version here. But I could darken midtones, I could switch this up here to shadows, and I could darken the shadows to create more contrast, right? I could use the sponge tool, which is also in the burn and dodge. And this is actually a contrast tool, which is why I think it's in the burn and dodge tool, because by taking away color, right? If I have this set to desaturate, a flow of 29%, I can brush here and just very selectively take away some of the green around her head in particular, so that that bright color isn't drawing us away. I'm taking away contrast so that her eye is clearly drawn to the subject. And even though I like the green, I want it softened down a little bit. But you see the problem that we have here on this image. We've desaturated a little bit. We've burned a little bit. Ooh, that's too much. You can go overboard really fast with tonal burning, where you're selectively burning shadows and things like that. Okay, but I can control where the eyes are going here with my burn and dodge. The only problem I really have now is this up here. So the instinct will be to crop it, or just to leave it. Do I leave it or do I crop it? Now you're back to this decisive edit problem. I shot it with the sky. There was a sunset there. I kind of want people to see that. So I shouldn't. I should show people that there was kind of a glowing sky back there. I'm losing something if I don't crop it. Okay, great. The sky is really bright. It's so much brighter than her. And we saw when we looked at the zonal map from Blackroom or Loomis, this was clipping, almost clipping, not quite clipping, but it was at zone 10 while she was at zone 6, 7, 8 in her skin. Okay, so maybe I don't want the sky. If I crop the sky out, sure, I'm losing the sky, but I don't clip. Here's the most important thing to ask yourself in a decisive edit. This goes for whether you convert to black and white. It goes for whether you are doing a portrait, a street photo, a landscape. It doesn't really matter. You need to ask yourself this one question. What is my subject? Not 2, not 3, not, oh, my subject is the model and also the park. No. I have one subject in an image, because if I have 2, I essentially have no subject. There can be supporting cast, there can be cool things in the background, there can be a beautiful sunset behind your model, but if you're shooting a beautiful sunset with a model, you still only can have one subject. Either the sunset is going to be your subject or the model is going to be your subject. If you try to make both your subject, you're going to fail. The image is most likely to fail. You can have the beautiful sunset included. I love doing, you guys have seen my work probably. If not, you can go to the portfolio over at seimfx.com. I love wide environmental portraits. But one of the most important things, and this is something I learned from Kim Whitmire, you can do wide environmental portraits, but if somebody's paying me for a portrait or for a wedding, they're the star. Everything else is supporting cast. My subject, my model, my couple is the star of the show. And that's where my focus has to be. So the way I decisively edit this is I say, look, this sky is distracting from my subject because I have this hot spot up here. I see the beautiful model and my eye goes here. And sure, maybe it comes back, but there's a distraction. I want my eye to happily roam the scene, the curves of these trees right here, right? That are kind of swirling around the model, the Z on the wall, and the path that she's sitting on. Look how all the lines lead to her except up here. So I can crop it, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, if you've seen me post this image before, you've probably seen me crop it. But there is another way to deal with it, and that is if I want a larger frame. Let's say I don't want to crop it down. I don't want to lose that much of my frame. Maybe I want some of the sky. And that's where this pixel paint layer comes in, because I can come in here. And what am I going to ask myself? Hey, there's a lot of green. Basically, what's surrounding my subject is greens. So I'm going to take a brush tool. I'm going to make it soft. I'm holding Alt to change the size, and then dragging the mouse left and right to change size, and dragging it up and down to change the hardness of my brush. So let me show you that up close, right? Diameter, hardness, opacity. So I'm usually going to use a very soft brush for this. Of course, you can change all these settings up here in Photoshop as well. Now, I have a brush on its own layer. Obviously, I don't want a big white mess. I'm going to actually sample the greens. Look at what's happening, because a lot of the work has already been done for me. I have all these greens up here already. All right. I'm going to turn my opacity of my brush down to like 10, 14, 15%. Now watch what happens. Now I can sample colors. This works with skin too. And I can reduce this. My bad, I should be doing this on our pixel paint layer. What I'm doing, and I'm going to change my brush size as I go along. I always look for this. You see that we have foliage that's out of focus. This is one of the easiest things to pixel paint, because I can take, and I've never done this to this image before, so if I screw this up and embarrass myself, it's my fault, because I'm showing you this edit for the first time. But you see what I'm doing? I'm essentially painting in colors that belong. Right? I can do this also to soften these leaves. I can say, well, I don't want these leaves. I like the green, but I want to soften them up a little bit. What am I doing by painting over and pairing colors? I'm sampling with the Alt key. I'm using the eyedropper to sample the colors and then painting them in lighter, darker, etc. around her to make that green foliage dominate, because that green foliage is my supporting cast, right? But what it's doing, I need to make it a little bit darker here. I'm getting a little bit too much. What it's doing is, as I paint in that foliage, It's reducing contrast. Contrast is what separates the line from the leaves, the way the light hits a leaf and you see the edge versus not see the edge. As I paint over that, yes, it looks like I'm blurring it, but what I'm really doing is softening the contrast. I'm taking detail out of those leaves. Now I can go back to our main edit layer. I'm going to drag it down to the plus icon and make a copy, and I'm actually going to do some cloning. I'm going to clone from here around these trees, and I'm going to see if I can clone some branches in from over here to this side of the sky, right? And I'm going to do it at in kind of medium opacity so I can kind of fake it a little bit, right? There's a wall up here. I got to mix it up so it doesn't look like I've just randomized everything, right? So kind of like there's a trees coming across the corner up here. So instead of open sky up there, what I'm doing is I'm telling the viewer that there was trees on either side, which is another way to do this. But I have to be careful, and I'm doing a quickie version, but I have to make sure that I get rid of the repetitiveness. Otherwise, it'll just look like I cloned in. So I got to bring some leaves in from different areas, et cetera, et cetera. Then I can come in, once I've done that, and say, okay, now let's go back to our pixel paint layer, go to our brush with the B key, and let's just start painting in. And let's bring some of these different colors of leaves, and we're kind of layering it over, right? Lighter, darker, so that we have this natural feeling of there was foliage on this side of the frame. I know if I'm doing this a little quick, and I probably still have some repetition I need to take out, but I promise you this works, and it works really well. And you might be saying, well, it would be easier if you had just cropped it. Well, that's probably why I did just crop it, because these leaves and having that upper section of the frame wasn't actually that essential. And I want to actually keep cloning in a little bit because I want this to feel real. There needs to be some patterning to those leaves, not just like I painted in some random crap. All right, so you can see I'm painting. I could actually take these leaves and sample them and then flip them 180 degrees up here so that when I cloned them, they were coming in. Whoops, I clicked the wrong thing. Did it wrong. Switch that back to 0. You can rotate that crop, and I could get the leaves the other way that way, but that's a little more of an advanced technique, and I'm just not going to show that right now. Okay, so bringing in some leaves, etc. Bringing in some painting. I don't want to make the whole workshop about pixel painting because that's not what we're here for. So I know I'm doing the quick and dirty job here, and it's not the greatest. But you can see what's happening. We combine cloning and then pixel painting to bring the focus in, to soften the background. And now I could come back here again and use the burn and dodge tool to darken down areas and make it look a little bit more balanced and contrasty like this, to again mix what I painted with the surrounding elements. Be careful you work around the hair as well when you're burning and dodging so that you don't get halos, etc. I could come back to the pixel painting, and this is how I would do an advanced edit on an image. Sure, I would use actions and things to get my overall effect, but to really refine it, I would keep working with it until I got the painterly effect I wanted to, and it's not perfect here. There's too much fakiness in this clone, but now I have a little bit of sky peeking through. I could crop it accordingly to make it a little more balanced so it would look natural. When I was done with this edit, you wouldn't know the difference. And even though it doesn't look perfect here, another 10, 15 minutes cloning this, and it would be. Now, I don't need to spend 10 or 15 minutes cloning. In the case of this image, I could have cropped it, but it was a decisive decision. Do I want the sky or do I not want the sky? If I want the sky, I need to get rid of those highlights and balance them out. I can use pixel painting, I can use cloning. If I don't want the sky, I can just crop it, and that's fine. Do I want a black and white or don't I want a black and white? If I want a black and white, does this image work for it? What did I have in my mind when I shot the image? Was I shooting for black and white or color? There's not a rule that I can't change my mind, but you should be thinking about this. I should be thinking about this when I create the image. A lot of you are probably saying, Gavin, you'd be way better off just to crop it like this, and you have a nice square image, upload it, whatever. And that's fine. That particular image can also be done as a black and white or a color and work good, but images that don't have a lot of tonal separation oftentimes are not going to look good. If you've ever taken an image in bright sunlight, have you ever been out shooting and thought, okay, we have bright sunlight, I should be able to convert this to black and white and it'll look cool. And then you go home and you do that and it really doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? There's contrast. The problem is there's too much specular contrast. Contrast needs to create a distinct separation between your subject and your supporting cast. And if you notice what I was doing with the pixel painting, even if it was a little sloppy with my cloning, with the burning and dodging, which was really bringing our subject out, with running effects, with Lightroom, different tools and actions, what I was actually doing was creating separation between our subject and between our supporting cast. So if I take a photo, let me find a photo that's not good. Okay, I want to show you a photo that's not good. Let me just look for a not good photo. And when I say not good, I mean not good light. Do you know how rare it is that I go out in midday sun and get anything but a snapshot? I almost never do. Because sure, if you're out with the family, you want to take a quick photo, fine, take your photos. But you know how many times I've been in places like a national park and I'm watching people at high noon take photos of the Grand Canyon or some other beautiful natural place, right? The light isn't good. And I already know that their images are not going to come out. They might be great vacation memories, don't get me wrong, but the images are not going to be there. If I take even a low light photo, even a sunset photo, like this one here, okay? If I take this photo right here, it's late evening, shortly before sunset, but the light's still too harsh. Even more so if it was high noon, right? If I wait just a few minutes, which I did, the image just a few minutes later was dramatically better. Why? Because it was subtler and it was softer. So if I take the image and I just fast forward a few minutes, let me find one here of one of the final selections that I got from this. Hang on, let me go to the grid mode again. If I go to here, look at this light, still on a raw file, by the way, just 15 minutes later. Look how now we have separation, we have shadow, and we have contrast. So what's wrong with the first one? And where do I be decisive to make it work? If I go to the earlier image, you can see here, let's do a comparison. A similar pose, almost the exact same spot, but this one has all this specular highlight. This one on the right, the focus isn't actually the model. The focus is not focused. The exposure is coming in kind of from all angles because there's a lack of light control. There's a lack of contrast control. And so if I take this photo here and I turn the exposure up, okay, I can bring exposure into her face, and then I could go into here and I could do highlight recovery and try and pull it down a bunch, and I could do burning and dodging. I could burn and dodge this for an hour and improve it and probably make it a usable image. But it still wouldn't be half as good as this one with only a minor amount of tweaking that had nice, soft, sun just hit the horizon kind of light. So when you convert to black and white, I can take another image like this one and say, okay, this works good in color. Here's all kinds of cool variants from, say, Filmus that I could do, and it would look great. This will also look good in black and white. But why? Why does this work in both reasonably well? even though I really shot this for color as well. It works for both reasonably well because we not only have clean color separation between the water, which can then be controlled as contrast with sliders like greens and blues, but we actually have a difference in tone. If you look at our histogram, we have separation between the different color channels. We have a wide use of the tonal range. We have brightness, brighter areas in the blue and darker areas in the green channels. And so what's happening is when we convert this to black and white, even though there's not a huge contrast and we need to work with it a little bit, we're getting separation. We're creating lines. And when we create lines, we get results in either color or black and white. We're enhancing contrast. When you pixel paint, you're enhancing contrast. You need to decide as the image maker where an image is going. And the best time to start deciding that is before you press the shutter, but that's a process you can do throughout the entire journey of editing an image. If I take this shot here, I can say, well, do I want this? This is high key right now, right? So I could lighten it, I could darken it. Do I want to keep it really bright and nice? Do I want to do a dark vignette around the edge? Do I want to crop it? Do I want to go black and white? But no, I don't want to go black and white here because there's not enough separation in tone on her skin tones. It's actually a very soft image. Most of this histogram is leaning towards the lights, but all the color channels are more or less in the same relative position. So I'm using color here because that's what I shot for. That's what I lit for. And you can see what I'm getting at here. The theme of this workshop was, hey, we can use tools like Lightroom, we can use channels, we can create better black and white by using the right tools. We can create atmosphere, we can darken edges, we can pixel paint, and we can put things together. But being decisive on an image is equally as important as the edit. Deciding, are we going to make high key or low key, black and white or color? Are we going to do deep dark reds or bright contrasty reds? How does that relate to the other colors? Does that enhance my subject? Do I show the client black and white or color? Because I'm certainly not showing them both. I'm certainly not showing them both. Am I converting to black and white just to be different? Or was I visualizing black and white? Or did I visualize wrong and actually the image is way more atmospheric and beautiful and subtle in a black and white image? You see, we've gotten to a point in photography where we have so many tools at our fingertips that we're kind of adding effects just for the sake of adding them. And what I try to teach and what I try to do when I create actions and presets and editing packs is give people tools not so they can be more zany and crazy and all over the map, but so that they can be more consistent. But also, if you look at something like Filmist, the subtle variations of how we interpret color, just like when we put a roll of film or a sheet of film in the camera 30 years ago, we would choose an aesthetic based on what color characteristics that film had. So if I come to here, just like I'm mimicking in Filmist, right? I go to Filmist and I'm saying, no, I want Agvaflex RSX for its kind of faded color, or Agvaflex 45 for its very vintage look kind of color. No, I'm going to go down here to my Portra. I'm going to do Portra for that nice soft skin tone. Let's do a Portra 160 push, and then we'll adjust our white balance a little bit accordingly. Or no, I'm going to do Natura for that kind of bright poppy feel, the way it puts a little red in the skin tones, the way it handles the greens, right? When we were shooting film, people say, oh, I only edit my own images with my style. Well, the film photographer certainly didn't. Our style is here. Our style is how we create the image, the composition, the framing, the light, the tone. But the way we process it, yes, that's a style. But those aesthetics, if we use tools, if we use presets, if we use actions, we start to get consistently in the way we create aesthetics. If I edit this image, this is another important decisive thing. If I'm doing a wedding, and let's go back to that wedding group image, because it's a perfect example of this. If I do this wedding group image, and where was that? Let's go here. This is actually me. I took the photo, but it was on a timer. I had somebody else push it because I was at this wedding. If I take this photo right here and go in and say, all right, I'm going to edit this with the Natura look, right? Or with the Portra look. I'm not then going to go to the next version, the next group, and say, no, now I'm going to edit this in black and white. That would show absolute indecisiveness and insecurity on my part. I'm not going to go to here. I don't want to manually edit each of these images, not only for time's sake, but because it wouldn't work. If I say I like the nature look on this image, every photo that's of the groups is going to get that same nature look, that same white balance, because there should be consistency. Because why would one group look completely different than the other in the same scene and the same lighting conditions? It wouldn't. So back in the day when I would go to a wedding and I'd put film in, I'd be like, well, for this part of the wedding, do I want portrait or do I want Delta 3200, right? Do I want a gritty black and white aesthetic that's kind of atmospheric, or do I want a classic color look? And we had to decide back then when we did that. That's why I love playing with Filmist and why I'm always working on the Filmist project and making it better. Because by getting my mindset back to film, it helps me be decisive. I'm saying, no, I'm going for that portrait look today. No, I'm going for that Fuji look today. No, I'm going for that vintage Agfa look today on this image. Now, I might do a session in each grouping, right? Each change of clothes, each scene, I might say, no, this scene looks better with this other look. This scene looks better in black and white. But if I go to my photos and I'm editing and I say, no, I like this in color, right? I'm not then, if I have 5 favorites from this, and you can see it doesn't look great in black and white. Why? Because most of the contrast is created by color. The red, the black of the bra, the skin tones, the teeth, things like that. Our subject stands out because it's her. If I take away all the color, there's still some contrast, but this wall is equally bright or brighter than the skin tones. And we don't have a lot of distinct separation. Obviously, I could come in here, I could crop it, right? I could do a vignette. So let's go and put a vignette and darken the edges. I could do things to draw my eye more to the subject, of course, if I really wanted to do a black and white, but it wasn't actually shot for black and white. So I'm saying, okay, I like this color process. If I have 10 images from this pose, that is to say this wall scene, I'm not going to do one in black and white, one in color, one in another color. I'm going to say, no, I'm going to decide what works for this image. I'm going to be confident in that, and I'm going to run with it. And they're all going to be edited exactly the same. Then 10 images later, or 3 images later, or 1 image later, when I'm at a different pose, well, that's a different thing. I'm at a different scene. Now I say, okay, this grouping, I'm going to edit this in black and white. And then I'm going to do all those in black and white. Is this making sense? Are you seeing why we have actually 3 phases here? I'm going to say this as we close out, because I've been going for about an hour here and I don't want to drag on. Because I know we don't have a huge group in here today. This was kind of a short notice workshop, not a lot of questions. And so I'm not going to bore you guys. Here's the 3 things that we're getting at. The 3 parts of decisive editing, whether it's black and white or color, is number 1, start planning your edit in your head before you ever take the photo. Really start looking at your scenes. This is something we had to do more in the film days because it was more expensive. It costs more to press the shutter. This is why it's good to change. If you want to shoot black and white, change your screen to black and white. You still have your raw file. All your color information is still going to be there when you import. But on that screen, you're seeing in black and white. That's going to help you visualize. I love doing that for street photography because it helps me see tone and line better. You tend to see the tone and line better in black and white because you're forced to. Because if you shoot that sunny image, remember just a minute ago I was saying, hey, let's take a bad image and work with it. And I showed you this one here. The light wasn't good in this. There's so much specular highlights. There's so little separation. There's so little spotlighting of the subject with the light, because to expose the subject correctly, the background starts getting washed out because there's so much sunlight scattering down. And it's even worse if you shoot in midday. That's why when you go out and you shoot in midday, it almost never works. Even though in your mind, on the tiny little screen, you're like, oh, this is kind of cool. There's people walking in the square. There's a cart going by over there. There's a vintage car. And you're like, this is great. This will look good in black and white. And then you convert it to black and white. Why doesn't it work? Because your highlights and shadows are scattered. You have contrast, but your contrast should be bold. It should be segments of contrast. Your subject's face is lighter than the background, for example. The clothes are illuminated differently and so that it has a rim, right? There's a defined line. Contrast is used to create lines. Just like when I pixel painted over the leaves, what happened? We were softening the separation between light and dark from one side of the leaf for the other, which is effectively taking away contrast, which made them less visible. If you go out to a grassy field, and you've all seen this, some of us, well, probably all of us have done it, you go and you take a portrait of a model in a grassy field at 2 in the afternoon, and you're like, oh, she's so pretty, everything looks great. To your eyes, it's a little harsh, but we'll just convert it to black and white, and then it doesn't work. Why? Because you have specular highlights on every plant. There's tiny shadows, there's tiny highlights that you can never get out unless you just obliterate them and take away all contrast. You have bags under the eyes because there's bright light coming here and that's going through the eyelashes and the hair. There's no dimension, there's no wrap, there's no separation of the subject. So contrast created by either light or by color, then interpreted either in color or in black and white, gives you a subject-focused edit, and the rest becomes a supporting cast. So the first step in decisive editing is you start deciding before you press the shutter. You can't do that with past images, of course, but you can do it from now on. The second step in decisive editing is being honest about your scene. Is it lit well? If you're shooting a wedding and the lighting just sucks, you got to use the tools like presets, like actions, like pixel painting, like I just showed you. You learn the tools and you use those so you can make the best of an image and still make the client love it, even in a non-ideal situation. Because at events and things like that, you can't always control every aspect. Okay, that's fine. So the decisive edit at that point is, whether it's ideal and perfect or not, where do I crop it? Is it black and white or is it color? It's not both. What does it look good in? If it's color, how can I get the best color combination to make it work? Am I going higher key, like here? All right? Or am I going lower key, like here? Which one do I want? But with either one, there needs to be separation. Am I going color or am I going black and white, taking away that color channel information and putting the emphasis on lines and tones? None of these answers are wrong. But if you ask yourself those questions, everything from the color, the black and white, the crop, your framing, your composition, all these things. And all these things I know can be a workshop in and of themselves, and we're kind of glossing over them. But if you ask yourself questions that are honest about your image and give yourself answers, ask yourself, what is my subject and what do I want to do with it? You're going to get a better edit. And the third step is to implement everything. Implement your visualization all the way through to how you present it. Are you going to put a border around it when you upload it or not? Are you going to frame it or put it on a canvas? Part of the decisive edit, actually, if you're selling or presenting an image, really is like, am I going to have it lean on the bright side or be dark and moody when I upload it to my page, to my site, to my Instagram, when I print it for the client? Am I going to use a matte or not? Am I going to use glossy paper or matte? The decisive edit demands that we carry everything through. And if you start doing this with confidence, if you say, nope, I'm editing this in black and white, I shot it for black and white, I'm going to frame it in a white matte. If you know that much before you ever press the shutter, you're going to get way better results. This is what shooting large format film helped me to understand better, because it was expensive, it was costly, it was slow, and I had to decide. I had to decide what film I used and where I was going with it, a lot more than I did on digital. There's nothing wrong with changing your mind and playing around. But if you have the mindset of, I'm going to be decisive, so should you make an image black and white or color? Right? That's that second step of the decisive edit. And the third step is just how to implement it, how to finish it. How much do I sharpen? How much grain? Do I want grain? Do I want texture? Do I want to put a linear border around it for web or a matte around it for print? These things may seem like incidentals, but if you look at the best photographers, from Ansel Adams to Clyde Butcher to people that are famous on Instagram, the reason that their images are loved is because they are decisive. They're consistent. They're not uploading, oh, check out, here's the blue tone version, here's the black and white version, here's the sepia version, and here's the color version. Those are perfectly fine questions to ask our peers and our groups. But if we're presenting an image to the world, we should have a decisive plan. Start it here. Number 2, step 2 is the edit. Step 3 is the finish. And all three of those come together to create a decisive image making formula. One image, one subject, Every image is its own. Sure, you might take 3, 4, 5, 10 images from a group, preferably not 100. You'll notice that even on my page over at seimfx.com, if I have a theme from a session, I rarely upload more than 3 or 4 images. Same with an Instagram, right? Even if I'm showing to a client a group of poses, they're probably only going to see 6, 7, 8, 10, sometimes only one version of that because it's the best one and I know it and I've decided and that's the one I'm going to show them. And that's okay. I know portrait photographers that will do an entire session and their client only sees one portrait, like a family portrait. Just like if they were a painter and they present one image to their client. Think about that. That takes some decisiveness because you're not saying to the client, which one do you like best at that point? You're saying, I'm the artist, you trust me, I've built rapport with you, your image is good and here it is. And that gives you a lot of decisive control. Okay, I think we've covered it. Hang on. Where did I go here? I feel like the browser's crashing, but I think my stream is still there. Hi. All right, you guys, I think I'm going to wrap this up. There's not a lot of questions. I think I bored you today, to be perfectly honest. And that's life. I thought I had a great concept here, and I was hoping we could get a large group of us in here and really talk about this. But oftentimes my theories that have taken me decades to put together, sometimes I don't think I present them quite as strongly as I would like to, which is my fault. Because these are things that if you understand, you take years off your training and your understanding. If you grasp, that's why I'm always doing videos on the channels in different ways about using contrast. Because once you get that, absolutely everything changes. Once you understand zones and tones and contrast, everything changes. Now you start visualizing, you start being decisive. You don't sit there and say, I don't know how to crop it, because you know what your subject is. You don't say, I don't know whether to do color or black and white, because you look at it and you say, no, I know this is how it looks the best. And you do it and it works because you know the principles of light theory, of color theory, of contrast theory. And once you know that, everything comes together. So I'm sorry if I bored you guys today, but I had this in my mind today and I just really wanted to share with you guys what I've learned, because sometimes years and years of work suddenly just comes together for me as well. And I'm like, no, I gotta tell people about this because this is important. If they understand this, they're gonna take so much time off their training because they're gonna grasp the fundamental concept that's going behind how do you be decisive when you take a photo, when you edit a photo, and when you present a photo. When you do that, you're the man or the woman. And your images are going to thank you, your clients are going to thank you, and the results are going to speak for themselves. I'm going to wrap this up for now. I do want you guys to go, and I'll put a link. You know what, just so you know, the spring sale, as of when this video is recording, if you're watching this later, maybe not, but the spring sale is live on the site right now, and these videos and stuff that I'm doing this week are kind of little bonuses for the spring sale week to just mix it up a little bit and do something different and share ideas. And you guys can go over there and get things like Blackroom, like Alchemist, like Filmist, things like that. And there's some really great deals over there right now. So head over to seimfx.com and check it out. Let me know in the comments if this was not clear enough, if it was over the top, how we can make these better, because I really would like to do more of these streams and make them very interactive and be answering your questions and really just be kind of sharing and exchanging information as the Light Tribe here, as we build the channel, as we build the page. Make sure you're on the group over on Facebook, the Light Tribe group. In fact, if you go over to the page, you can link up with the group over there. But I'll put all this stuff in the comments of the video in terms of like links to the group. You can check out my website and all the stuff over there. Get the right tools. If you have part of decisive editing is having the right tools in place. If I say, I love this portrait, I know I want to film it, look, I'm going to Filmist. Rather than, what do I want to do with this? Do I want to edit black and white? Do I want to use Belladonna because it's a little more, a little more edgy color? Do I want to use natural HDR for dynamic range? Most of the time, by the time I get into the editing room, I already know what tools I'm going to edit with. And that's why I don't edit manually, because editing manually lacks decisiveness. Editing manually, like burning, dodging, darkening, things like that, is very powerful and can be very decisive. But saying, how am I going to edit the color, and just sitting there and tweaking with the sliders is actually because I don't know what to do with it. A lot of times I'll go in and I'm like, I bet you Portra 400 is going to look great on this. I'll bet this preset from Natural HDR from Belladonna is going to look. The more you edit, and the reason that you should save your own presets, that you should use other people's presets, that you should buy and create actions, that you should study and watch videos, is because you're going to start to eliminate the fluff and the things that are just wasteful experimenting. And experimenting's good, but sometimes you can just spend a lot of time and it draws you away from the focus of where you want to go with an image. If I want an image to be black and white, I'm going to say, great, I'm converting to black and white. What's the best black and white tool to use for this? No, I want more atmosphere. I'm not even going to edit this in Silver and Lightroom. I know I want to go to print with this. I'm going to Photoshop and to Blackroom because I can get a more advanced atmospheric edit than just with a raw edit. Or no, I'm just going to edit these 10 images. I love them all in black and white. I'm going to edit them quickly in Silver so I can upload my favorites to Instagram. There's nothing wrong with that either. But I don't have any print on the wall that hasn't been in Photoshop. I'm always going to refine the edit in Photoshop, which is why I've been pushing learning Photoshop lately, and that it doesn't have to be intimidating like in the Photoshop Fast course, because Photoshop can be fun and easy, and if you know it, you'll edit better. Bernadette, I appreciate it. I hope no one was bored, and I hope some of you that come in late watching this, that couldn't make it to the live stream, get something out of this. Please let me know in the comments if this was confusing, if you loved it, if you hated it, if it was beneficial, if you want more focus on one type of editing. We can do more of these in the future. My overall topic today was how to be more decisive in general with our photography and our edits. And so because of that, we covered a lot of different aspects, which can be a little overwhelming at times. If you want me to break out slivers of that and do videos on them, I will do that as well. But sometimes I like these overarching videos to kind of pull all the threads together. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you will check out the spring sale, subscribe to the channel, and support us over there at seimfx.com. We'll see you next time. Make sure you send me an email, effects@seimstudios.com, if you have any direct questions, or just drop me a comment here in the video, and I always try to respond to those as well. And we will see you guys next time. For now, I'm going to sign off, and I appreciate you guys being here. Peace.